So this is the last section of bench work that I need to finish, and probably the most challenging piece of bench work. So this area in red represents the decline from the upper level down to the lower level. So I will need to raise everything approximately 7 inches above the girders, and then the decline is 1.9% until it matches up with the end of the bench work there. So I need to elevate this section and cut out effectively the ramp. The additional challenge to this is that this bench work is almost 4 feet deep at its widest, and that will be impossible to lay track. So once I have this bench work cut out, I need to spin it around, and then I'm going to put the cork roadbed down and lay the track and wire it against the wall before returning it to its original position. And I need to keep all the sections aligned. So this baseboard is completely cut into its 2 components, and that is the upper level station yard, I guess we'll call it, and then the decline, which travels the entire length of this sheet of plywood. And because I need to put down some cork roadbed, lay the track, and wire it before I spin it around and put it back against the wall, I have bracketed the cutout section all along and attached it so it's one solid piece. I'm by myself, and putting these brackets on will allow me, or will hopefully allow me, to spin it around and install it without any alignment headaches. I soldered every rail joint on my last layout, and I think that contributed to some of the problems I had, because I just didn't have the movement, or the track didn't have the movement or the place to, or the area to room that it needed in order to stop from kinking and warping. So this time around, and all the straightaways, I'm only using unsoldered rail joiners and only soldering curves. That means that I've decided that every length of flex track gets its own set of feeders that connect to the bus wire. My bus wire is going to be 14 gauge and my feeder wires are 18 gauge. And I'm making sure that I solder them roughly in the middle of every length of flex track, and then they'll all connect back to the bus. And I'm hoping that I will never have any electrical or mechanical issues with the track. One last minor point. I have been told that the expansion gaps that are on any of the flex tracks ought to be on the outside of a curve, so that when you're bending the track, instead of compressing the ties on the side with the gaps, you're expanding them on the outside edge. So as my entire layout has a double track mainline, one of the things that I wanted to make sure was that I kept all of my tracks parallel. And so I decided to 3D print this really basic little clip that goes between the rails like this and keeps it parallel. I have one set that is 30 millimeters to center and another one that's 50 millimeters to center. The 30 millimeters is for my mainline tracks, and the 50 millimeter is for my passenger platforms. So So 3 sections of flexible track have been installed, and I have spun the table back to its original orientation. So now what I need to do is add the joists and the risers and mate this tabletop against the tabletops over there, keeping in mind that because I'm using a semi-modular system, nothing will be connected permanently against all of the benchwork you see here. This will be independent of that and then bolted together. I have the upper deck mostly installed. The upper deck is now installed, and you can see where it transitions across the joins. That was really challenging. I needed to build individual risers to go on each of the joists and then elevate the tabletop by myself and screw it in place. But now it's in place, and the next part is to work on the incline on the return loop that surrounds the city. I will be putting individual risers on each of the joists as I make my way around and try to maintain a 1.8 or 1.9% grade. So I have completed all of the bench work. I was very lucky that I had some time off, and I put a number of full days into completing all of this. And I thought I would give you a really quick tour of the 4 different areas in the bench work and how they relate to my scale model. So the first section of bench work is represented by this part in the scale model, and it's the part I'm referring to as West Harbor. I completed this last month, and as you can see, I've started to install some of the track, and I certainly have all of the roadbed installed. The benchwork here is quite deep, almost 4 feet, and you can see that there's this large chasm behind here, which is part of the return loop. And that area represents this elevated city. So my thinking is that this area here, where you see the benchwork end, represents the area on the scale model that is the retaining wall. And so my reach to this area is comfortable, and I'm hoping that I will build the city on my workbench, and I'll be able to continue to lift segments of it into that chasm. The second area of benchwork that I also completed last month was what I'm calling Stewart Yard. This is the representation of the yard next to West Harbor Station. It's quite small, and this is meant to be the scenic feature of the layout. It has 2 bridges crossing over one another on top of a water feature, and it's going to have some built-up hills in the background. Like the first section, this will be somewhat challenging to scenic. I do have reach. My standard reach is about a foot from the wall. With a step stool, I can get to the back. But again, I'm hoping to be able to build the sort of mountainside elevated area on the workbench and then simply lift it in. Now the tracks then continue on to the third section of benchwork here, which I'm going to call the Aldershot Station area. So what's not well represented on the model is this is a passenger terminal right in the face of the layout. It's got this very long retaining wall, almost 10 feet of retaining wall that I'm going to be able to cover with graffiti and etc. And so this passenger station, which is quite modest, will be on the front of the layout here. So that way I can enjoy trains up close and personal at a great height. So this area is the feature area of the layout, which is my version of Toronto Union Station, as well as the large sort of skyscrapers and other such buildings, which is represented on the model by this little area here. You can see there's Union Station in all its glory. And I'm very excited about this feature, and I guess it's not something I brought up before when I was discussing the layout. So the end of all the passenger tracks are under the city, and I want to model this area so that it's visible. So that represents this entire area back here. Now, the city will be about 3 inches elevated on top of all the passenger track, and I'm leaving room that you can see into the city from this angle. So the city limits, the retaining wall will be here with the city on top, but from this perspective, you're going to be able to see inside of the entire passenger area. I did a diorama taken from the Resident Evil movie franchise where I made a micro layout with all sort of creepy goodness in it. And I'm thinking I would love to have this area similar so that you've got railings for the passenger platforms because that's where all the people are. And then it just sort of degrades down into this abandoned area. Graffiti covered, maybe cast off vehicles. So that, as an overview, is the benchwork complete. This was a lot of effort, and I didn't realize how exacting I needed to be, but I've actually really enjoyed this process, and this benchwork is rock solid. When I was working on the back here, I was leaning on this full weight and nothing moved. So the benchwork is finally done. I can't believe it was September that I tore out the old layout, and those past 3-4 months seemed like they went really quickly, and then again, they seemed like they went slowly. As I mentioned, this was a really challenging project because I tried to push myself to do as good a job as I could, and it was also really rewarding. It's been very satisfying to complete all of this work this year. I'm excited to be able to start 2025 getting right into the track laying and doing the electrical. It should mean that I'll have a running layout very early in the new year. So what's next? Well, the next layout update will definitely be dealing with track laying and wiring. And 2 things that I will most certainly be looking at is working with Pico Code 80 turnouts and Pico Code 55 track. Pico Code 80 turnouts benefit from a bit of shimming on the guardrails, and so I'll be showing you the process that I use to do that. And likewise, when you connect Code 80 turnouts with Code 55 track, the rails align, but the ties do not. And so I've got a solution for how I dealt with the various heights of roadbed. Finally, I will probably take a look at my approach to wiring this time around, how I'm going to run my bus wires, my feeder wires, and the sort of connectors I'm going to use in order to marry the whole thing together. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. It's been a great year. I go from one layout to another layout in the course of 12 months, and it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate all your continued support, and I hope to see you on the next video, and before that, hopefully my next live stream. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.